everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. So today looks like I might be doing a discussion, and in a way I could be, but for the most part I'm just kind of sticking more towards facts and kind of the facts that relate to my journey towards trying to find an agent. This is something that I thought might be relevant, especially with everyone who has been doing NaNoWriMo or might be new to it, doing camp for the first time. I thought this would be something possibly beneficial if you are someone like me who would like to be traditionally published one day. So I'm just going to kind of talk about the road to getting an agent, which is what I'm on currently, and why I think it's important. For the most part, to summarize it, I think it's important to know this because I did not know it. Back when I was like 16, 17, 18, and I was starting to write and I had these big ideas for writing books and novels and wanting to be published one day, I had no idea what it took to actually get to step whatever, which is getting an agent. There's a lot in between there, and I do think it's good to basically know about these steps. The reason that I thought of this topic today is because I was talking to a friend who was just asking like some general questions. You know, it started off asking me like some advice for writing of like, here's a brief story I wrote. Would you critique it for me? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So I gave some feedback, and we ended up getting into a long conversation about how to go through the process of writing a book, wanting to find an agent, getting published. And the differences that I know between traditional publishing and independent publishing. Because there's a lot. Some of the steps are very similar, and I will only be speaking to the traditionally published path because that's what I'm going for. If this changes down the road and I end up deciding to independent publish, I can make an entire new video about that topic, and I will do so. But for now, we are talking about the road to getting an agent in terms of traditional publishing. So step one, the easiest step to think about is you have to write a book. This is a bit eye roll worthy, and some people might be like, duh, like, yeah, you have to write a book before you get published. I would probably just say that this step is important to include because I'm actually surprised the amount of people that I've heard about. Like, I don't know anyone personally, but in my journey of like researching how to get published and writing works, I'm amazed at how many people just think that they can query an agent and have an impartial novel. This has definitely happened. Like I said, I've definitely come across my research with people who are just in the industry as well as agents themselves who have said that they have gotten query letters, which is something that'll come up later. They've gotten query letters from aspiring authors, and those, like what they talk about in their query letter, if they ask for a full novel to read through, people can't give that because they didn't actually finish the novel. So this is definitely an important step. Before you even think about the steps that come after, you need to make sure that your book is start to finish complete. It has a beginning, a middle, and end. It has a very clear arc. It has a very clear storyline. So like I said, you definitely need to have a cohesive story from the beginning to the end to make sure that when you query later down the road, if someone in the agenting world says, hey, I actually really like your first few pages, can you send me your entire manuscript to read? You have that available. So that is definitely step one. Step two. Step two is where we start editing our novel. So most of the time, and this is probably 99.8% of the time, when you write a novel, it's not going to be the final copy. Unless you write your novel and you publish it yourself, for the most part, you are going to go through multiple steps to make it the best that it can be. So you need to edit. I always recommend that you at least do one hardcore edit for yourself before you start distributing it to other people. Because you're definitely going to find that you're going to be rushing through in some parts. You're going to like have filler in there. Some of your story parts that you had in your head might not be as cohesively written out on page. For my own novels, both of them that I've written so far and that I am currently editing, there's definitely been like little plot holes that, you know, could use some tightening up. And there's some word choices that, you know, just make no sense or doesn't sound like the characters. There's going to be things that you need to build up in your world, your magic system if you have it, your character development. There's a lot of things that you're going to need to stack up. And even if you're a really great writer, there could definitely be things that you need to edit. And it could be as minor as I missed a comma here. I put an exclamation point where there should have been a semicolon. There's a random at symbol in there. You know, it could be something simple as that, but you should always read it through at least once to make some edits. Step number 3 is after you edit your novel, you should start to acquire critique partners and alpha readers. So critique partners and alpha readers are people who are going to read through and pick through your novel with a fine-tooth comb of saying what works, what doesn't work, and giving you just pretty much straight up critiques on why this may or may not work for a wider audience. So this could be anything from structurally pointing out issues to saying that the character flaws or the character development doesn't really make sense or there is none, to the plot of the novel is just straight up boring, or some parts work, some parts don't, there's holes in this system, this was really confusing, etc. They're going to point out the bigger things to make your novel stronger, and you should definitely get one. From my own experience, and there's definitely videos I've talked about this in the past on my channel, it's hard to find critique partners sometimes, especially ones that are going to stick with you, because I've definitely had my fair share where I have exchanged for only a few chapters and then never talked to those people again. Or I've exchanged entire novels, and for some reason, like one instance, we exchanged a full novel for full critiques, and that person ended up saying, like, I can't do it, I'm sorry. So, you know, it happens. Life definitely gets in the way, but just definitely make sure you at least have one critique partner, if not two, and an alpha reader or two. They could be the same thing sometimes. Step number 4 is to then edit again. Once you have your critiques back from those few select people who are reading it very early on, you want to make more edits, especially if they have some solid suggestions. Like I said, if they say, you know, something in your magic system was flawed or that they just didn't understand it, that's going to signal to other readers down the road that you aren't going to convey what you want to convey. That's why having those critique partners are so essential, because they can point out the flaws before, you know, your book gets scrutinized by the masses. Basically, it's going to save you a lot of hard time, because fresh eyes on any kind of work is going to point out things that you might not read, especially as in the case with me, when we started reading over and over and over again the works for my co-written book. We edited that so many times on our own, and then finally when we had beta readers, we were like so convinced that there could be no grammatical errors still left in that book, and lo and behold, we just kept reading over it because we saw the work so many times. So again, you know, make sure that you have those editors. What are we on? Step 5, I think. So step 5 after you edit again is, depending on how well and confident you think it is, you can either go to your critique partners again or start finding beta readers. So beta readers are the next level. You're going to end up using people who are relatively common readers, people who aren't going to like look at it with a fine-tooth comb and say like these are like all the issues. Your beta readers are people who are going to point out like whether they enjoyed the story or not. Occasionally you might get beta readers who will offer some of those more critical critiques, such as, you know, this didn't work for me and why, or I really hated your main character, I had a hard time getting into the story. The magic system was so all over the place that it just made me cringe. And that way you're going to start to get a little bit more of a personal view in readership. So for instance, this is the time that you want to send your novel out to a decent amount of people. And keep it like, you know, contained. You don't probably want to share it with 100 people because then you're going to have so much feedback. But I would definitely recommend 10 to 20 at least. You're going to get some good information out of it. Again, it's definitely going to be how you want it to be. You can have as many or as little beta readers as you want. It's just, you know, what kind of information you're getting. I would suggest 10 to 20 because, again, with everyone in real life, people have lives, people have their own issues that they're facing, people might be writing or reading their own stuff. And to just depend on a short list of people for your critiques, you might not get as many back as you hope. We ended up doing about, I think, 20 or 25 in the end, and I would say 85 to 90% of people did not get back to us at all, with a few percentage in there, like 1 to 2% of people who only gave us partial feedback. So it's definitely important to make sure that you don't hold your expectations very high, because people are definitely going to drop out and not follow through on those critiques. Life happens. So that's why I always suggest at least 10 to 20, but you can do whatever you want and more. So step 6. This is where we start getting into the technical stuff of what we need to do. There's really, I would definitely say too, this order, I should probably stop saying it's step 6 or steps at all, because you can do this out of order. It's just The closer that you get to the querying stage and getting an agent, this is where you want to start tightening these up. So that's why I'm saying steps. But step 6, once you have edited your novel to its max, when you think you cannot edit it anymore, you can't hone it, you can't perfect it, it is a finished sculpture. At this point, you want to start thinking about what you need to do to get an agent. This is where I think it comes a little bit harder for people who don't realize what this process entails. And I certainly didn't. There was a lot of things, and even to this day, when I queried last year, there were things and people we didn't query because we weren't ready for it. We learn, it's human. So at this point, you want to start preparing what we call a query letter. A query letter is essentially a breakdown of who you are, what your novel is, and why you're querying the person you're querying. There's various different ways of writing query letters, and I would honestly use Reddit or Google and Google some of the authors that are out there because some of them have websites with these resources on them. The way that I wrote my query letter is that I said, hello, this is who I am. We're offering a book that we think you would be interested in. Give that the first paragraph, and then the next 3 paragraphs are the breakdown of our book. We typically have, it's the catch, the meat, and what's at stake. That's typically your 3-step paragraph, and you write that out, you perfect it. And then the last paragraph kind of says a little bit more about the book, about yourselves as the author or authors, and why you're querying. It's not a lot, and a lot of times people say it should be about 250 words or under. So it's a lot at stake. The reason why this step is so important is because it's so hard to write a query letter. Not everyone has this hard time. There's definitely, I've talked to authors at events that have said, I just ended up being really good at querying, and I did one query letter and got it. I've also seen people on YouTube, like other bigger booktubers or author tubers, who have said that they did a shot in the dark, wrote up a query letter, sent it out, and got agented right off the bat. And I'm so happy for them, because that's amazing, because my entire existence of querying has been a lot different than that, where we've struggled and we've poured over, and maybe too much pouring over, all the details of this query letter. But you want to make sure that your story is clear, your intentions are clear, and you need to make it interesting, and that's sometimes where it can fail. So I definitely recommend that you take time to perfect this query letter if you are trying to get an agent. Query letters are mandatory. You cannot get away with them. Even if you do a Twitter contest or you're pitching at an event, most of the time they're still going to want that query letter somewhere. And that's what happened to us as well. We had gotten a like in a Twitter contest, and we had queried. The problem is that we weren't prepared for the query letter, and we threw one together haphazardly at that time. That was our very first query, and it was a mess. So I don't recommend doing that. I actually recommend you take the time to really flesh out your query letter and make sure that it sounds like your book and it sounds like something that someone wants to read, because that's what they're going to read first. They're going to be drawn in by what you say in that content. I can't tell for sure, but I definitely think that if people aren't interested in the content of the query letter, there's a chance that they might not read the attached pages. So your attached pages can be so interesting, but they might not be hooked by the query letter. Which takes me to my next step. I guess step 7 is make sure that your initial pages are worthwhile. You definitely want your initial pages. A lot of times, I would say there's anywhere between 5 to 25 pages that they request to be attached to the query email. So the query email is the letter, that your basis, your contact information, all of that, and then you attach pages in the body of your email, and it's typically, like I said, between the first 5 to 25. I think the most that I had was up to 50 pages, which was crazy. Most of the time, they were the first 5 pages. So it's a lot at stake. You're giving people 5 pages to read to determine if they want to represent you. That's a lot. So definitely, your whole book should be polished by the time you're going to query, but if it's not, I don't know why you're here at this step 7, but you should definitely have those first 5 pages the best that you can offer. Sometimes you might then get requests for partial or full manuscripts. Like I said, that's where it's going to count, because if you get accepted, you need the rest of your novel to be completed and well thought out, not just the first 5 pages. But that's typically what people are going to see. So your query letter and your first 5 pages need to be down pat if you want someone to be interested in your work. Step 8 goes along with this, and not every agent is going to ask for this, but occasionally an agent is going to want a synopsis of your story, and that's tricky. So a synopsis, as you probably know, is basically an overview of the entire book. It is not the query letter. The query letter and the synopsis are two very different things. Where the query letter is you're building up this intrigue of your novel. The synopsis is a condensed version of your novel. And that's literally every chapter in the book from beginning to end condensed in a 500-word paragraph, maybe? Paragraphs, a couple paragraphs, who knows? But again, this is tricky, and this is something that we are working on. This was recently added to our list because as we queried last year, again, there were a few agents that we wanted to query that required a synopsis, and we weren't ready for it. It's not that we couldn't do one, but we weren't prepared to kind of rip through our book real fast and put something together haphazardly. So we decided not to query the agents who asked for that, and instead we put them on the back burner for a possible round 2 if we were doing querying round 2, which we are. And because of that, this round, after we tweak our query letter again, trying to make it a little bit better, we're also doing our synopsis. And I could do maybe a whole video on how we're going to do the synopsis if you guys are interested, but that's something that you definitely want to make sure that you have just in case. All right, so what are we on? Step 8. So I would probably say, okay, you got all of this information. Your book is solid. You have a query letter. You have your pages that you're going to be attaching that are solid. And you wrote your synopsis. What's next? So I would obviously recommend the next step is research your agents. You cannot get anywhere if you don't research. And it's definitely true because there's, again, with my information that I've come across on the internet, there are definitely people who will just find an agent out there and query them blind. That's never a good thing because those agents might not represent the genre that you're requesting, and you could definitely turn them off from any future projects you may have that could actually work for them, as well as you can get blacklisted as far as a whole agency goes. So if that person wasn't into it and they kind of talked through the other agents at the agency, you might never end up getting a chance at that agency at all. I'm not saying that definitely happens, but there's definitely times where inappropriate actions can lead to negative consequences. So with that in mind, I definitely recommend doing research. And I would definitely recommend, on top of that, to make an Excel sheet or some kind of tracker to ensure that you are following through with everything. Me and my co-writer, Caitlin, are both very neurotic when it comes to lists and planning and all of that fun stuff. And I beat her to the punch because her inner Virgo did not come out when I decided to make my Excel sheet. I beat her this time. But what I actually recommend is doing an Excel sheet, especially when you're starting to actually send the query letters out. You want to make sure that you're tracking to see who's responded, who hasn't responded, and what their deadlines are. I'm pretty sure that mine included the agent name, the agency that they work in, and then a bunch of other information that they require. So for instance, I did like the preliminary work as far as like how many pages do they require, the length of time that they would take to respond to emails, and any particular information that was specific to them. So for instance, like I had said in some of my, it's like a note section, which was like, typically responds within 24 hours, typically responds between 4 to 6 weeks. We'll give detailed feedback. We'll only give form rejections. And if you don't know what that is, a form rejection is literally just like an automatic email that gets sent out that says like they looked through it, but they weren't interested. So for the instance, those ones that we got the form rejections for, I always made a note of that just in case, because we didn't want to get defeated when we just kept getting form rejections. And the majority of people will send form rejections. It sucks, but it happens. And then at the end, I always, like I said, have a submission of when we queried and when they finally give us feedback, what the status was. And that way I keep track of it, because for instance, if in 1 week, if we queried 10 people and in 1 week, 5 of those agents rejected us immediately, gave us the form rejection, said they weren't interested, I could mark that down, because then if on week 2, one person says that they're interested and we send them our manuscript, and in week 3, they haven't gotten back to us, but now 2 other agents are interested, and that first agent then offers us representation, we want to have that information present so that we could say, this person, number 1, just offered us representation, but we haven't heard from people 2 through 4 yet. So we want to make sure that we give them the chance too, especially if we are interested in those agents and we want to, shop around. Essentially, at the end of the day, you just really want to have your research and your query statuses in check so that you can feel confident going forward. The other part of this is if you're like us and you end up taking some time away from querying. We queried last April and we got all rejections, and that's okay. It happens. But going back into this now, looking at it when we're starting to do our queries for the second time, we want to make sure that we're, one, not querying the same people unless we are interested. So there's some differences because we are querying young adult for us and now we're querying as an adult novel. So some of those agents, one, aren't going to want us because they only represent young adult, or two, they might accept adult fantasy, and because we changed the book so much, they now might be interested a year later. So there's definitely some pros and cons to that list. So that's why I always recommend keeping tabs. The last step of this is to hit the submit button. So like I said, there's definitely different things for agents as far as, what kind, do they want emails? Some people use like forms that you have to go on their website and actually fill out a form for. And that just kind of comes with the practice of doing your research beforehand. And at that point, after you submit to an agent, it's a waiting game. We definitely had such a variation of when we got feedback. We ended up hearing from every single agent we sent out. Every single agent sent us a form rejection. But we had literally within 24 hours, we had 1 rejection. And then within 3 days, I think we had 4. And then it started staggering from there between, like I said, we did it April of 2019. I think the last rejection came in August. So it was quite a long time. And we were laughing at that point. Like, just remind us again that we failed. But we were having a good time with it. It definitely didn't try to detract us from what we were doing. But be aware that that's why you want to have all of this stuff done and ready to go, because it matters in the end, especially if someone says we're interested, we want to read your full manuscript, or we're interested, we want to be your agent. At this point, I can't speak further than that. I know that there are definitely steps that are going to come from getting an agent to getting published, but I'm not there. So I'm only speaking up into the fact that I'm trying to get an agent, and that's where I'm at. I'm sure there could be other steps in there, but just be aware that it's not an easy one and done thing. You definitely want to take time, and if you really want to be serious about getting an agent, you should take the time for it. It's not fun. It's not glamorous all the time. You're going to hit bumps in the road. You're going to have people who hate your book. You're going to have people who give you bad critiques in the early stages, and it's going to make you want to grit your teeth and go, but you don't understand. And it's okay. Not everyone is going to understand your book, and not everyone's going to like it, and that's true for the early stages to publication. People bash books all the time that other people love, and people love books that other people hate. It's just a matter of opinion. But, just make sure that along the way, you're doing everything you can to give yourself the best chance, because that's what matters in the end. So with all this information in mind, I hope that this video was informative for anyone who is thinking of trying to get traditionally published. There's definitely a lot of steps along the way, and sometimes you might have to repeat those steps quite a few times. As in the case for me, the editing steps 2 and 3 or 2 and 4 happened over and over and over again. And we definitely had a couple rounds of beta readers, and it was an interesting time. Definitely fun in the end, but it took a lot longer than we expected to, especially because we did not know how much actually went into it until we started being serious. And it's okay. If you are finding this video and you are a young author and you haven't even gotten to the querying stages yet, hopefully this will be really helpful for you, and you can definitely take the time that you need to get it done. If you're like me and you barreled ahead and tried to do everything without actually knowing where you were going, maybe this will kind of help you reevaluate too of, oh yeah, I missed a couple steps in there. And if not, I hope you just enjoyed this video and you enjoyed this chat. I will definitely keep you guys posted on where I'm at with everything as far as querying goes and editing. And if we get to that point where I can say I have an agent, I will have follow-up videos to kind of come out. So in the meantime, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.